The Velkarian palace was nothing like Earth. Its tall black stone walls seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. The air carried a faint metallic scent, and the guards standing at attention wore sleek armor that shimmered under the artificial lights. Ethan Carter, a human security officer, adjusted the collar of his uniform and took a deep breath. This was his first day on the job, and he was about to meet Queen Ciara, the ruler of Velkaris. He had heard the stories, how the queen was known for her cold, calculating mind, how her enemies feared her, and how her people respected her strength. She was one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy, and now Ethan was assigned to protect her as part of a new diplomatic agreement between humans and Velkarians. As he walked into the grand throne room, his boots echoed on the smooth floor. The hall was filled with high-ranking Velkarian nobles, their sharp gazes fixed on him. Their violet skin and glowing golden eyes made them look almost otherworldly, even by galactic standards. Ethan kept his posture straight, trying to ignore the weight of their stares. At the far end of the room, Queen Ciara sat on a towering obsidian throne. She wore a regal outfit made of dark, flowing fabric with silver accents. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, framing a face that was both elegant and intimidating. Her glowing golden eyes studied him as he approached, unreadable and piercing. Ethan stopped at a respectful distance and bowed slightly. Ethan Carter, reporting for duty, Your Majesty. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, something unexpected happened. The queen's eyes widened, and for the first time in her reign, she froze. Her hands, which had been resting gracefully on the throne's arms, clenched slightly. A quiet gasp escaped her lips. The entire room tensed. Nobles exchanged glances, confused. The ever-composed Queen Ciara, the ruler who had faced wars and conspiracies without flinching, now looked shaken. Ethan, unaware of what was happening, stood still, waiting for instructions. But the queen's expression had changed. Her usual cold, controlled look was gone, replaced by something closer to shock. Or was it pain? The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Then, in a whisper barely audible, she spoke. Keller. The name meant nothing to Ethan, but the way she said it made his stomach tighten. It was as if she were seeing a ghost. A high-ranking noble, standing close to the throne, stepped forward quickly, breaking the tension. Your Majesty, are you unwell? Ciara blinked, as if waking from a dream. Instantly, her expression hardened again, and she straightened her posture. I am fine. Her voice was sharp, but there was a slight tremor to it. She stood up from her throne, her long cloak sweeping the floor behind her. The meeting is over. The nobles hesitated, exchanging glances, but none dared to question her. One by one, they bowed and left the hall. Ethan remained frozen, completely lost. Had he done something wrong? Why had the queen looked at him like that? A guard approached him and motioned for him to leave as well. You should go. But now, the guard insisted. Ethan clenched his jaw but obeyed, turning on his heels and walking out of the throne room. As soon as the heavy doors shut behind him, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. This was not the start he had expected. Meanwhile, inside the throne room, Queen Ciara stood in silence, her fists clenched at her sides. Her heart pounded. It was impossible. It couldn't be real. And yet, the human who had just stood before her, he looked exactly like Prince Kaler, her lost husband, the one she had buried years ago. But Kaler was dead. He had died in battle. His body had never been recovered, but the war had been brutal. There was no way he could have survived. So how could a human bear his face? Her thoughts swirled in chaos. She needed answers. She turned to her royal guards. Bring him to me again. Immediately, Ethan paced in his quarters, his mind racing. Something strange had happened in the throne room. Why had the queen looked at him like that? Why had she whispered that name, Kaler, as if she knew him? He was a soldier, not a diplomat. He had been assigned to protect the queen, not to confuse her. And yet, from the moment he had stepped into that grand hall, everything had gone wrong. A sharp knock at his door made him snap to attention. The door slid open, revealing two Velcarian royal guards, their violet skin glowing faintly under the hallway's artificial lights. "The Queen requests your presence," one of them said. Ethan frowned. "Did I do something wrong?" The guard didn't answer. "Come." Something about the way they spoke made his stomach tighten. There was no hostility, but there was also no room for argument. The Queen wanted him, and that meant he had no choice but to follow. Inside the throne room, Ethan entered, his boots once again echoing against the smooth stone floor. The massive chamber was empty except for Queen Shiara, standing in the center. She had removed her heavy ceremonial cloak, revealing a sleek, battle-ready outfit beneath, something a warrior might wear rather than a queen. But Ethan barely noticed her attire. His focus was on her golden eyes, locked onto him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "Ethan Carter," she said at last, her voice softer than before. "You are human." Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the question. Yes, Your Majesty." She took a slow step closer. "Where were you born?" He hesitated. "New Terra, second colony of the United Earth Federation." Her fingers twitched, and she inhaled sharply. "New Terra, not Velcaris." Ethan frowned. "No. Why would I be born here?" The Queen exhaled, as if trying to steady herself. Then she turned away, staring at the towering obsidian walls. "Do you know the name Kaler?" That name again. Ethan had no idea who she was talking about, and yet the way she said it made his chest feel strangely heavy. "No," he admitted. "Should I?" The Queen slowly turned to face him again. "He was my husband." Ethan felt his breath hitch. Husband. The fierce and powerful Queen Shiara had once been married. He had never heard anything about that in the diplomatic reports. "He died in battle," she continued, her voice quieter now. "Or so I believed. Until today." Ethan felt a creeping unease settle into his bones. "Because of me?" Shiara nodded. You look exactly like him." A chill ran through him. "That's impossible." "Is it?" she challenged. "Velcarians and humans are biologically different. There should be no reason for a human soldier from a distant colony to share the face of my lost husband." Ethan clenched his jaw. "I don't have an answer for you, Your Majesty." The Queen studied him for a long moment. Then, as if making a decision, she gestured for him to follow. "Come with me." A hidden truth. Ethan followed Queen Shiara through a narrow passageway behind the throne. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. At last, they reached a sealed chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings. In the center of the room stood a stasis pod, an old one, covered in dust and age marks. Shiara approached it slowly, her fingers hovering over the glass. "This belonged to Kaler." Ethan's throat went dry. "A stasis pod." She nodded. "His body was never recovered after the battle. But this was found, empty." Ethan stared at the pod, his pulse quickening. Was she suggesting that he, Ethan Carter, human soldier from New Terra, was somehow connected to this missing alien prince? "This doesn't make sense," he said, shaking his head. "I have human parents. I grew up on a human world." Shiara narrowed her golden eyes. "And yet your face is not human. It is Kaler's." Ethan took a slow step back, feeling an uncomfortable weight settle in his chest. Could this really be a coincidence, or was there something about his past he didn't know? The Queen turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I intend to find out the truth." Ethan met her gaze, heart pounding. So did he. Ethan stared at the ancient stasis pod, its surface covered in dust and faint energy markings. It was impossible. He had lived his entire life as a human, trained as a soldier, fought in battles, and never once questioned who he was. And yet here stood Queen Shiara, staring at him as if he were a ghost from her past. "Your Majesty," he said, keeping his voice steady. "This has to be a mistake. I'm not Kaler." Ciara's golden eyes didn't waver. "Then how do you explain it? My people have never seen a human who looks like you, not even close. You have his face, his presence." She hesitated before adding, "And my instincts do not lie." Ethan swallowed hard. He wanted to deny it, to say she was imagining things. But a small, nagging voice in his mind whispered that something was wrong, that maybe there was more to his past than he knew. "Tell me," Ciara continued, "what do you remember from your childhood?" Ethan frowned. "I grew up on New Terra. My parents were colonists. There was nothing unusual about my life." "Were they your real parents?" She pressed. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but then stopped. A sudden, unsettling memory flickered in his mind. He had never seen baby pictures of himself. The earliest photos in his family's collection showed him as a small boy, already walking, already speaking. His mother had always brushed off his questions with a warm smile, saying, "We lost our old records in the move, sweetheart." At the time, he had believed her. Now doubt crawled up his spine. "I don't know," he admitted. Ciara stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then perhaps it is time you found out." The records room. The Queen led Ethan through the palace's underground corridors, moving with a sense of urgency. The deeper they went, the older the architecture became. Massive stone walls carved with ancient Valkyrian symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Ethan had to admit it was impressive. The Valkyrians were a warrior race, but they had a rich history, filled with legends and mysteries. Was he about to become part of one? Finally, they arrived at a sealed door, guarded by 2 royal sentries. At Ciara's command, the guards stepped aside, and the massive metal doors rumbled open. Inside was the royal records chamber, a place that held centuries of Valkyrian history, stored in floating holograms and crystalline memory banks. Ciara walked to a central console, placing her hand on a glowing panel. A deep hum filled the air as the system activated. "Computer," she commanded, "search for Kaler's genetic records." A shimmering hologram appeared before them, a detailed genetic profile of the lost Valkyrian prince. Then Ciara turned to Ethan. "Now we compare." Ethan hesitated. This was crazy, but at the same time, he needed to know the truth. Slowly, he stepped forward, pressing his hand onto the scanner. The machine whirred, scanning his DNA with a soft blue light. For a moment, there was silence. Then, "May ATH 99.8%. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. The room spun around him as he stared at the result. That's not possible." Ciara's breath hitched. "It is." Ethan took a shaky step back, shaking his head. "No, I grew up human. I have human memories. How can I be him?" The Queen's gaze darkened. "Someone must have taken you, erased your past, hid you among the humans." Ethan clenched his fists. If that were true, then someone had lied to him his entire life. But why? Who had stolen him from this world? Varied memories. Ciara placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, her grip strong but not forceful. "You may not remember, but your body does. Your instincts, your abilities, they are still inside you." Ethan looked down at his hands. He had always been faster, stronger than most soldiers. He had passed every combat test with ease. Even his reflexes, he had survived battles that should have killed him. Had it all been because he wasn't really human? Ciara's voice softened. "Let me help you, Kaler." Ethan flinched at the name. "I'm not him." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Maybe not yet, but the truth is out now, and there are those who will not want it known." Ethan tensed. "What do you mean?" Ciara's expression grew serious. "If someone took you from Valkyris and erased your past, they must have had a reason. And if they learn that you're discovering the truth..." She let the sentence hang. Ethan understood. He was in danger. "Then we have to find out who did this," he said firmly. "Before they find me first." Sierra gave a sharp nod. "Then we start now." As the two of them left the records chamber, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. Somewhere out there, someone knew the truth about his past, and they had worked hard to keep it hidden. Now he was going to uncover it, no matter the cost. Ethan's mind raced as he followed Queen Sierra through the palace halls. His entire world had been shaken. He wasn't just a human soldier. He was Kaler, the lost prince of Valkyris. The DNA test had proven it. But if that was true, then who had taken him from this world? Who had hidden him among humans? He clenched his fists. Someone had stolen his past, erased his memories, and turned him into a completely different person. And now, they might come for him. Sierra led him into a private chamber, away from the royal guards and palace staff. The room was grand, with high ceilings and golden symbols carved into the walls. A large window overlooked the capital city of Valkyris, its towering spires glowing in the night. Sierra turned to him. "We don't have much time." Ethan frowned. "You think someone will try to stop me from learning more?" She nodded. "If someone went to the trouble of erasing your past, they will not want you remembering it now." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Then let's figure out who they are." Sierra walked to a holographic console in the center of the room. With a swipe of her hand, ancient records floated in the air before them. Valkyrian history, military logs, royal family records, everything. She searched quickly, moving through the files with expert precision. Then, suddenly, she stopped. "There," she whispered, pointing to a file. "Operation Eclipse." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What is that?" Sierra hesitated, then opened the file. A classified document appeared before them. It was old, nearly 3 decades old, but the details were chilling. Prince Kaler, declared missing, presumed dead, last seen during the War of the 5 Moons. Possible abduction by an unknown force. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. They had assumed he was dead, but someone had taken him. He looked at Sierra. Who else had access to this file? She scanned the document. Only the royal court and the High Council. Ethan's stomach tightened. "You think someone in your own government did this?" Sierra's face was unreadable. "I don't want to believe it, but someone covered up your disappearance, and we need to find out why." Ethan nodded. "Then where do we start?" Sierra took a deep breath. "There is only one person still alive who was there the night you vanished." Ethan's eyes sharpened. "Who?" She turned to him. "An old war general, Lord Varric." A dangerous meeting. Lord Varric was one of the most powerful figures on Valkyris. A decorated war hero, a strategist, and an advisor to the High Council. He had served under the old king, Ethan's supposed father, and had been present on the night Kaler disappeared. If anyone knew the truth, it was him. But getting to him wouldn't be easy. Ethan and Sierra approached the Imperial Archives, a massive fortress-like structure that held Valkyris' most classified information. Varric resided in the upper chambers, deep within the heavily guarded complex. The Queen's status gave them access, but Ethan could feel the eyes of the guards on him. Word must have already spread about him, about his resemblance to the lost prince. Sierra led him through the grand halls until they reached a set of tall silver doors. 2 armed guards stood at attention. "We need to speak with Lord Varric," Sierra commanded. The guards hesitated. Then one of them pressed a panel, and the doors slid open. Inside, a tall figure stood by a massive desk, looking out of a circular window. His dark silver armor gleamed under the soft blue lights of the chamber. His back was straight, his presence commanding. Lord Varric turned slowly, his piercing yellow eyes settling on Ethan. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Varric's expression darkened. "So, the lost prince has returned. Secrets unveiled." Sierra didn't waste time. "We need answers, Varric. What happened to Kaler?" What do you know about Operation Eclipse? Varric's gaze didn't leave Ethan. He looked at him not with surprise, but with recognition. Ethan clenched his jaw. You knew. Varric finally spoke. I knew you weren't dead, but I didn't know where they took you. Ethan took a step forward. Who are they? Varric hesitated, then sighed. The High Council made a decision that night. They believed Valkyris was in danger. That war would consume us. And they feared you, Kaler. Ethan froze. They feared me. Varric nodded. You were born different. Stronger. Smarter. The prophecy said you would change the fate of Valkyris. Some believed that meant you would destroy it. Ethan's blood turned cold. So they got rid of me, he said quietly. They gave you to an external force, Varric admitted. Someone powerful. Someone who could erase your past completely and place you among the humans. Ethan's hands clenched into tight fists. Who? Varric hesitated. Then his expression hardened. The High Council never told me their name. But I know this. Whoever took you is still watching. Ethan's pulse quickened. Someone out there knew the full truth. Someone had been keeping an eye on him all these years. And if he was starting to remember, they might come for him. Sayara stepped forward. We need to find them before they find him. Varric exhaled. There is one place that may hold the final answer. The last classified location where the Council made contact with your captors. Ethan's heart pounded. Where? Varric looked him in the eye. The Forbidden Sector. Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon as he stood outside the entrance to the Forbidden Sector. The towering metal gates loomed before him, covered in ancient Valkyrian symbols, warning intruders to stay away. The entire area was surrounded by thick fog, making it impossible to see beyond a few meters. Strange energy pulses crackled in the air, sending shivers down his spine. This place was abandoned, but it was far from lifeless. Sayara stood beside him, her expression tense. This place was sealed off after the war. No one comes here anymore. Ethan exhaled. Except the people who erased my past. Varric, the war general, had given them this location before disappearing. It was the last place the High Council had contact with his captors. The answers were here, hidden somewhere in the ruins of this forgotten place. A small drone hovered in front of them, scanning the area. It belonged to Xiara's royal fleet, designed to detect any movement or energy disturbances. After a few seconds, the drone beeped. There's something ahead, Xiara whispered. Something alive. Ethan nodded. Then let's find out what it is. Ghosts of the past. They moved carefully through the ruined buildings, their boots crunching against shattered stone and broken metal. The entire sector looked like a battlefield. Destroyed structures, abandoned vehicles, and burned-out control panels. Ethan's eyes scanned the surroundings. Something about this place felt familiar, like he had been here before. His head throbbed. Flashes of memories flickered in his mind. A laboratory, men in armor, voices whispering in a language he couldn't understand. Sayara placed a hand on his shoulder. Are you okay? Ethan blinked and nodded. Yeah, let's keep moving. They entered a large circular building, its walls covered in strange markings. A single console stood in the center, flickering with dim blue lights. It was still active, which meant someone had been here recently. Sayara walked toward the console and placed her hand on the interface. The screen glowed, and suddenly, a holographic projection appeared in the air. Ethan's heart stopped. It was a recording, an old security feed. And in the video, there was a boy with Ethan's face. The experiment. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes locked on the projection. The boy looked about 5 years old, sitting on a cold metal table, surrounded by alien scientists. Strange machines peeked around him, scanning his body. One of the scientists turned to the camera. The experiment is complete. The human child has fully integrated with the memory suppression program. He will be placed among the Earth population immediately. Ethan's breath hitched. This was proof. Someone had taken him as a child, erased his identity, and planted him on Earth as if he had always belonged there. Sayara clenched her fists. They treated you like an experiment. Ethan's blood boiled. Not anymore. He reached out and pressed a few buttons on the console, bringing up additional files. Data logs, genetic records, mission reports, everything about Operation Eclipse. Then he found a name. Project Overseer, Supreme Chancellor Ralvos. Sayara's eyes widened. Ralvos? He was one of the High Council leaders. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then he's the one who ordered this. But before they could read further, a warning alarm blared through the building. Intuideras DTECTED. Security Purotocios Activated. Sayara grabbed Ethan's arm. We have to go. Now. The enemy reveals itself. The ground shook as metallic doors slammed shut around the building. Red lights flashed from the walls, and robotic defense drones emerged from the ceiling, their weapons locking onto Ethan and Sayara. Run! Sayara shouted. Ethan dodged as a laser blast sizzled past him. He rolled behind a fallen metal beam and pulled out his sidearm, firing at the drones. His shots hit their mark, but more were coming. Sayara used her royal energy blade, slashing through the incoming machines with precision. Sparks flew as the robots collapsed, but the alarm kept blaring. Reinforcements were on their way. Ethan scanned the room for an exit. Then he saw it, a ventilation shaft near the ceiling. There, he pointed. Sayara nodded. Cover me. Ethan fired at the approaching drones, keeping them back as Sayara leaped onto a ledge and kicked open the vent cover. Go, she yelled. Ethan jumped up, pulling himself inside as Sayara followed behind. The vent was tight, but they crawled through quickly, escaping into another part of the facility. The alarm still echoed behind them, but for now, they were safe. They slid out into a dark corridor, catching their breath. That was close, Sayara muttered. Ethan nodded. Too close. But they had what they came for. The truth was now clear. Supreme Chancellor Ralvos had orchestrated his disappearance. And now, Ethan was going to make him answer for it. Ethan and Sayara moved quickly through the dark corridor, their footsteps echoing against the cold metal floor. The alarms had finally stopped, but they knew it wouldn't be long before security forces arrived. They had uncovered the truth. Ethan was taken as a child and experimented on by the Valkyrian High Council under Supreme Chancellor Ralvos' orders. Now, Ethan was more determined than ever to confront the man responsible for his stolen past. Sayara kept checking the small holographic map on her wrist. There's a hidden transport station ahead. If we reach it, we can escape before reinforcements arrive. Ethan nodded. Then we move fast. As they turned a corner, a sudden blast of energy exploded nearby, sending sparks flying. Ethan and Sayara dove for cover behind a fallen metal beam. A deep voice echoed through the hallway. You should have stayed in the dark, human. The elite guard. A tall figure stepped forward from the shadows, clad in dark, armored plating. His glowing red eyes locked onto Ethan. Behind him, two more Valkyrian elite guards aimed their weapons, ready to strike. Ethan clenched his fists. He had faced many threats in his time as a soldier, but these warriors were different. They were trained to eliminate anyone who threatened the High Council. The lead guard smirked. We have been watching you since the moment you arrived. Did you think we would let you leave with what you have learned? Sayara gripped her energy blade. You can't hide the truth forever. The guard laughed. The truth means nothing if you don't live to tell it. Without warning, the elite guards attacked. Ethan rolled to the side, dodging a powerful energy blast that scorched the floor. He fired his sidearm, hitting one of the guards in the shoulder, but their armor absorbed most of the impact. Sayara moved swiftly, her blade slicing through the air. She clashed with the lead guard, their weapons sparking with every strike. Ethan took cover behind a metal column and reloaded his weapon. He needed a strategy. Head-on combat wouldn't work against these heavily armored opponents. His eyes scanned the area. Then he saw it, an exposed power conduit on the ceiling. If he could overload it, the electrical surge could disable the guard's armor. Turning the tide, Ethan shouted to Xiara, "Hold them off, I have an idea." She nodded and blocked another incoming attack, her strength barely keeping up with the elite warrior's relentless strikes. Ethan aimed at the power conduit and fired. The bullet shattered the casing, and sparks flew as the overloaded energy system crackled with unstable electricity. The lights flickered, and the entire corridor shook. Then, a massive surge of power erupted. The elite guards were caught in the energy wave. Their armored shields failed, and they staggered back, struggling to move. Sayara didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, striking down one of the disoriented warriors with a swift, precise slash. Ethan followed up, delivering a powerful strike to the second guard, knocking him unconscious. The lead guard, still weakened, growled in frustration. "You will regret this." Sayara pointed her blade at him. "Tell Ralvos, we're coming for him." The guard scowled but didn't reply. He activated a small device on his wrist, and in a flash of blue light, he teleported away. Ethan exhaled, lowering his weapon. That was close. Sayara nodded. "We need to go. Now." Escape to the capital. They ran through the corridors until they reached the hidden transport station. A sleek, small stealth ship sat in the center of the hangar, its engines already charged for launch. Sayara accessed the controls. "This ship was built for high-speed travel. It can get us to the Valkyrian capital in a matter of hours." Ethan nodded. "Then that's where we'll find Ralvos." As they boarded the ship, Ethan stared out of the cockpit window, his mind racing. The memories of his stolen past were finally coming together, but the battle wasn't over yet. Supreme Chancellor Ralvos had to pay for what he did. Sayara set the coordinates. "This is it, Ethan. No turning back." Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon. "I never planned to." With a powerful burst of energy, the ship launched into the dark sky, heading straight for the heart of the Valkyrian Empire. The final battle was about to begin. The stealth ship pierced through the thick clouds, descending toward the Valkyrian capital. Below, the grand city stretched far and wide, towers of metal and glass shimmering under the alien sun. In the center of it all stood the Imperial Citadel, where Supreme Chancellor Ralvos ruled with an iron grip. Ethan stood near the cockpit, his gaze fixed on their destination. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. Sayara adjusted the ship's controls. "We only have one chance. If we get caught before we reach him, we'll be overwhelmed." Ethan nodded. "Then let's make it count." As the ship neared the Citadel, Sayara activated the cloaking system. The ship shimmered for a brief second before vanishing from the sensors. They landed on a secluded platform, hidden beneath one of the Citadel's lower sections. Ethan grabbed his weapon and checked his gear. No turning back now. Breaking in. They moved swiftly through the corridors, avoiding security patrols. Every step brought them closer to the throne room. Sayara led the way, using her knowledge of the palace layout to avoid traps and security checkpoints. But just as they reached a massive door leading to the inner chambers, a familiar voice echoed through the hall. "You should have stayed hidden, human." The elite guard from before emerged from the shadows, flanked by heavily armed soldiers. His armor still bore the scars from their last fight, but his expression was unreadable. Ethan stepped forward. "I don't have time for this. Move aside." The guard smirked. "Make me." Ethan clenched his fists. Fine. If a fight was what he wanted, then a fight was what he'd get. The last battle. The room exploded into chaos. Energy blasts flew in every direction as Ethan and Sayara fought against the elite forces. Sayara's blade sliced through the air, cutting down enemies with swift, precise strikes. Ethan moved like a storm, using his agility and sharp aim to take out enemies one by one. The elite guard charged at Ethan, swinging a massive energy weapon. Ethan barely dodged in time, the blade cutting through the floor where he had just been standing. Ethan countered with a powerful strike, his fist colliding with the guard's helmet. The force sent the warrior staggering back, but he didn't fall. "You're strong," the guard admitted, his eyes burning with determination. "But strength alone won't save you." Ethan smirked. "Good thing I have more than just strength." He grabbed a nearby shock grenade and threw it at the guard's feet. The device detonated with a surge of electricity, sending the elite warrior crashing to the ground. Ethan didn't hesitate. He turned and ran toward the final door. Ralvos was waiting. The Supreme Chancellor. The throne room was massive, with tall golden pillars and a grand seat at the far end. Ralvos sat upon it, watching as Ethan and Chayara entered. He was older than Ethan expected, his silver hair contrasting sharply against his deep purple skin. His eyes, however, were sharp and full of cunning. "So, you finally found your way home," Ralvos said, his voice calm. "I was hoping this day would never come." Ethan gripped his weapon. "You took everything from me." Ralvos sighed. "And yet you thrived. You became a soldier, a fighter. Would you have been the same man if I had left you in that insignificant human colony?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "You stole my family, my life." Ralvos leaned forward. "I gave you a greater purpose." Chayara's voice was cold. "You experimented on children. You stole memories, twisted minds. And for what? Power." Ralvos stood, his robe flowing behind him. "Power is survival. The strong must shape the future, or it will be shaped for them." Ethan aimed his weapon at Ralvos. "Your future ends today." Ralvos smirked. "Then come and take it." The final decision. Ralvos moved faster than expected, activating a hidden energy blade from his sleeve. He struck at Ethan, forcing him back. The two clashed fiercely, their battle shaking the throne room. Chayara took on Ralvos' royal guards, fighting them off while Ethan battled the Chancellor. Ralvos was skilled, but Ethan had something he didn't: true determination. With a final, powerful strike, Ethan disarmed Ralvos, sending the blade flying across the room. The Chancellor fell to his knees, breathing heavily. Ethan aimed his weapon at him. This was the moment. Ralvos smirked. "Go on, then. End it." Chayara stepped forward. "Ethan, wait." He hesitated. She looked at him with understanding eyes. "If you kill him, you become like him. We expose the truth instead. Let his empire crumble under the weight of his crimes." Ethan took a deep breath. Revenge would be easy, but justice was harder. With a final decision, he lowered his weapon. Ralvos' smirk faded. He had lost. The aftermath. Within hours, the truth spread across the Valkyrian Empire. Secret files were leaked, showing the Chancellor's crimes against countless species. His rule collapsed as his own people turned against him. Ethan and Chayara stood on a balcony, watching as the Empire transformed before their eyes. Chayara looked at Ethan. "What will you do now?" Ethan stared at the horizon. He had spent his life searching for answers. Now he had to decide what came next. He smirked. "I think it's time I started living for myself." Chayara smiled. "Then let's see where the stars take us." As they walked toward their ship, Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time. Freedom. The fight was over, but his journey was just beginning.